through the ghoul-guided gateways of slumber, past the wan-mooned abysses of night.
I'm from the Middle East, and many people where I'm from believe in the supernatural, including me. I will start with one story that my aunt, a very pious woman, told me about her experience at night. We rarely use electric dryers in my country, so after washing clothes, we hang them on the clothesline to dry. My aunt was doing the laundry at night and she took the clothes out to the balcony to hang. The line is on the outside of the balcony, so while she's hanging the clothes, she can look down on the street. She does look down, and she notices a figure standing under a tree. She's on the second floor, so it's easy to see every detail on the street. It was tall, very, very tall, and was completely black. From top to bottom, you couldn't see any detail except his eyes. They were huge, and she said that they were completely white and glowing. He was looking up at the first floor. My aunt screamed and ran into the house, telling her husband and my cousins what she saw. The men ran outside to see who it was, but there was nobody there. They were like, maybe you were seeing things. The next day, their first floor neighbor died. My auntie went to a sheikh and told him what happened, and he said it could have been the angel of death, waiting to take his soul, or a jinn. As outrageous as this may sound, I believe her. She is a 50-year-old woman who is sound of mind. She prays, fasts, and doesn't drink or take drugs. In that house, she has had many experiences. They used to see people from the corner of their eyes wearing white, moving from room to room. Other times, it would mimic their voice, calling out to them in the voice of my aunt. When they would respond, my aunt would tell them she never called them. I have many of my own experiences, and if you're interested, I'd love to share them with you all.
I saw someone share a military paranormal experience earlier, and it sparked me to want to share one of mine. I have only told this story to 3 people outside the old military buddies who have similar stories to this experience. First, I need to set the scene. Tucked in a mountain valley in Baghlan, Afghanistan, is a place called Russian Hill. Tapa Goghan is the best phonetic spelling of the local name. We just called it Tapa. Tapa is the only hill in this entire valley, and that is not by mistake. It is a burial ground that has existed since the time of Alexander the Great. Generations of locals have been buried here. That also includes the dead Russians from the failed invasion back in the 80s. Now, what did the American Special Operations do when they came to this valley? Level off the top and stick a combat outpost in it. So this is where my story begins. I was a regular Army paratrooper attached to the Special Operations team that built the outpost. One of the roles of the regular Army guys was to watch the radios at night. We would always get weird babble on them at night, but that could be written off as interference. Though years as a radio operator for my team led me to think otherwise. I had that duty one night. Between 2:45 a.m. and 3 a.m., my shift ends and I walk down the hill to our little bathroom area. I'm doing my business in this little cinder block hut with a hole when I hear someone walking up the hill next to me. I at first think nothing of it, probably just one of the local guards coming up for a shift change. But being the middle of the night and me in a combat zone, I do listen and pay attention. I can hear the sound of gear rattling, which I know for a fact, our locals don't wear gear with metallic buckles or boots for that matter. I've been on patrol with them multiple times and they hang around the outpost. I know what they sound like when they move. This was not that. This was the heavy-set boot steps of a soldier in combat gear. Not wanting to die on the throne, and the fact that I was one of very few Americans at this outpost, I decided I probably needed to know who was going up the hill. So I cracked the door and peek outside, and holy hell bananas, there is someone on the hill. It happened to be mostly a full moon, and I had some decent ambient light. They were carrying an AK, so not an American. They also had on a uniform and not the typical Afghan garb. Not one of our ALP. At this point, they are close to the top of the hill, and this person is not someone from our outpost. I grab my rifle and pop out the door, and I run up the hill after them. I get to the top, and not a single person was around. I walk over to the building where the radio guard is and knock on the door. My buddy answers and asks what's up. I check to see if anyone else was up or came in there, and he said no one has come out of the barracks. I bummed a cigarette, and we laughed about what just happened. The next day, while eating lunch, we joked about it, and one of the special ops guys who had been there longer than us told us it was the resident Russian ghost. He claimed it started appearing after they used dirt from the hill to fill our HESCO baskets for the wall. Turns out, they found some bones while doing it. He even told us that he had been face to face with it, and even drew his sidearm. All the other guys chimed in about their own creepy stories of that place. I got moved to another outpost a few weeks later. Always got super creepy feelings whenever we would visit there. I had a few more weird experiences there. That country has some energy to it.
Now, this account is not my own, but was told to me by a Marine during combat tours in Afghanistan. For the sake of his own job and security clearance, he has asked that I not give any names and never mention what region they were operating in. From my understanding, the individuals who were with him during the encounter were from a task force operating under orders from the CIA. Beyond that, I was told next to nothing. I will refer to him as Sarge, if only to have a name. Anyway, here's his story. During a patrol, checking on some local farmers, Sarge's unit was made aware of a deadly being living in a cave system near their farms. When pushed for more information, the locals were only willing to say that this being was stealing from their farms and had killed a few people who had made the mistake of trying to protect their livelihood from it. Convinced, the locals were being harassed by a group of Taliban fighters. Half of Sarge's unit was sent out to investigate and either arrest or kill any hostile forces in the area. So, with a few Humvees armed with M2 machine guns, they went out to the cave where the mysterious being supposedly lived. Upon arrival, they noticed nothing of interest. There were signs that something was living in the cave, and the soldiers found animal bones scattered around the entry. Not wanting to risk his entire unit fighting in a cave that the enemy would know very well, Sarge sent his 2 fastest Marines to investigate. The 2 men just gave the others a cocky grin and a thumbs up before disappearing into the darkness beyond the mouth of the cave. For 10 minutes, there was nothing. Not a single sound inside or outside the cave, other than the idle chatter of the bored Marines. Then sound erupted from the cave, shouting and screaming. In a matter of seconds, the 2 men emerged from the cave at a full run and zipped past their teammates, one of them shouting, "Run! Just run!" But like the hard-ass special forces operators they were, the other soldiers stood their ground, only to see a massive man emerge from the cave. He stood nearly 10 feet tall, with leathery skin and red hair. In one of its massive hands was a log that it began waving at the soldiers in a very obviously threatening manner. Shocked, but not panicked, Sarge commanded his men to shoot that motherfucker, and the 12 Marines opened fire. But the bullets seemed to be doing little more than pissing this giant off. Finally, in desperation, one of them fired a grenade launcher at the being, blowing out a massive chunk of its flesh, exposing a small portion of the ribs and ripping most of the skin and muscle off. The giant retreated into the cave, and the soldiers decided that the best thing to do was head back to the village and report to the rest of their unit. Clearly, this was more than a few Taliban militants. Even with that gaping wound, the giant was too terrifying for the Marines to willingly walk into its territory. So they headed back and reported to their CEO. Of course, their boss didn't believe them and demanded to see proof. So that night, they drove him to the cave and showed him some of the shredded flesh that had been blown off by the grenade launcher. From here, the report went up the chain, and nobody knows what was done to this creature. I wish he could have told me more, and maybe you guys can help me find an answer. From what I managed to find on my own, accounts like this are not uncommon in that part of the Middle East. Of course, since all of these reports were word-of-mouth stories, I don't know how factual they are, or if they're being exaggerated. If anyone out there knows what this thing could have been, let me know.
A little preface. I have always been on the sensitive side of the paranormal, ranging from just knowing something that I shouldn't to seeing stuff. I don't usually talk about this kind of stuff, since most people around me dismiss it as my imagination or I was dreaming. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was deployed to Afghanistan in October 2011. I was on FOB, Forward Operating Base, Hanson for the first few months and FOB Jackson for the last few months, before getting moved to Camp Leatherneck for the last month-ish, when our replacements showed up. My job was to operate the laundry service as well as provide clean water for showers. Technically not clean enough to drink, but you could, for US and Afghani troops. After the first month or so on Hanson, whenever I tried to sleep, I could feel a hand grabbing at my calf and slowly work its way up. I immediately dismissed it as being a result from stress or a sleep paralysis type thing, and it would kinda subside since it wasn't a very strong feeling at all. This happened for a night or two a week, but eventually stopped. Fast forwarding to when I was on Leatherneck, nothing happened when I was at Jackson, or even my short trip to Nole, so I forgot about what happened. At this point, a lot of real-life stuff had happened, and I was having issues going to sleep, so I would play some music in some earbuds, or I would rewatch a movie in my head. Basically, anything to get my mind off the day's events. I slept in a room with 2 to 4 other people, so depending on who was there, I would try to be considerate, especially with the not ideal layout of the 6 or so bunk beds. There was an emergency exit sign above the door that glowed a soft orange-red. Important later. One of the nights when I was running something in my head, 100% awake, eyes closed, no headphones, I heard 2 people, male and female, talking. This is not something I would imagine at all, but I was curious since I could hear them quite clearly. The conversation in my head went something like this. Me. Hi. Male. Hi. Me. What are you guys up to? Female. We're just looking around. Me. Where are you from? Male. We work for... insert not a human name. Me. You work for... attempts to say name. Female. No, silly. Slaps my sleeping bag. I immediately prop myself up on my elbow and look down at my sleeping bag, and there is a handprint in the fabric. Old 3-part poofy sleeping system. Where I had felt the slap, and it was at an angle that no one in the room could have gotten at. The other 2 were passed out with headphones on in the other side of the room, and there was no one else besides the 3 of us in there. At this point, I noped the fuck out for a smoke, and when I returned, put in some headphones and went to sleep. 2 nights later, I had the worst dream to date. At least I hope it was a dream anyways. I woke up in my bed and noticed that the normally orange light was blue. There was a faint electrical buzz, and there was a figure standing in the light. It was a solid black figure, no discernible facial features, but I could see an outline of it, and it looked like a British boy from around the early 1900s, based on the outfit. When I looked at it, I felt the worst sense of fear and dread. You could tell me that I had to go drive a car over a landmine and I wouldn't feel like this. After a few seconds, I just drifted back to sleep, and nothing else occurred for the rest of my time there.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. A big thank you to my collaborator, Creepypasta Adam, for joining me on this one. There's a link to his channel in the description. Be sure to check it out if you enjoyed his narrations. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. And as always, a huge thank you to all of you for continuing to support me. I appreciate it so much. And remember,
Papa loves you.